Section 3. When the language of the body becomes the language of the liturgy. Reflections on Tobit, the marriage of Tobias and Sarah. General audience number 114 from June 27th, 1984. Most of this was not delivered. Blessed are you, O God of our fathers, and blessed for all generations is your name. Let the heavens and the whole creation bless you for all ages. You created Adam, and you created his wife Eve to be a help and support for him. From the two of them, the whole human race was born. You said, it is not good that the man should be alone. Let us make him a help similar to himself. Now, it is not out of lust that I take this sister of mine, but with rightness of intention. Grant that she and I may find mercy, and that we may grow old together. And they both said, Amen, Amen. Tobit chapter 8, verses 5 through 8. Tobit, which belongs to a particular category, the so-called didactic tale of the genre midrash, in the biblical literature of the Old Testament, does not have features similar to the Song of Songs. Nevertheless, when we read the description of the wedding of young Tobias with Sarah, daughter of Raguel, we find a word that attracted our attention already in the analysis of the Song of Songs. Tobias calls his bride sister. Tobit chapter 8, verse 7. This is what he calls her in the prayer they say together in the first night after the wedding. The prayer we quoted at the beginning. I take this sister of mine. Sister. Tobit chapter 8, verse 7 and chapter 7, verse 11 is what her father Raguel also calls her when he agrees to give her as a wife to Tobias. Here are his words. She is given to you in accordance with the decree in the book of Moses, and as it has been decreed from heaven that she be given to you. Take your sister. From now on, you are her brother, and she is your sister. She is given to you from today forever. Tobit chapter 7, verse 12. These words could simply confirm the blood relation between the new spouses. In fact, Raguel, whom young Tobias meets during his trip, is a brother by blood of his father Tobit. See Tobit chapter 5, verse 9, and chapter 7, verse 2, from whom he had been separated for many years due to the Babylonian slavery. Still, when Raguel gives Sarah as a wife to young Tobias, he not only says, take your sister, but also, from now on, you are her brother, and she is your sister. Tobit chapter 7, verse 12. This means that between the young people, also a reciprocal relation should be formed through marriage, similar to the one that unites brother and sister. Here the words come to mind, my sister, my bride, from Song of Songs, chapter 4, verse 10, spoken by the bridegroom of the Song of Songs. These words from the poetical context of the song sound different in Tobit, yet, despite this difference, they seem to indicate in both texts a particular link of reference. In fact, through marriage, man and woman become brother and sister in a special way. The fraternal character seems to be rooted in spousal love. In the story of the wedding of Tobias and Sarah, besides the expression sister, we find a further relationship that evokes an analogy with the Song of Songs. We recall that in the duet of the spouses, their mutually declared love is strong as death. Song of Songs, chapter 8, verse 6. In Tobit, we do not find such a declaration, just as, besides, we do not find there any of the typical confessions of love that make up the Song of Songs. It only says that young Tobias loved Sarah to the point of no longer being able to draw his heart away from her. Tobit chapter 6, verse 19. Nothing except this sentence. In the story of the wedding of Tobias and Sarah, however, we face a situation it seems, that strikingly confirms the truth of the words about love, strong as death. We must go back to some details that can be explained on the background of the specific character of Tobit. We read there that Sarah, daughter of Raguel, had already been given in marriage to 7 men. Tobit chapter 6, verse 14. But that each one of them had died before uniting with her. This had happened through the work of the evil spirit Asmodeus, as he is called in Tobit. Young Tobias, too, had reasons to fear a similar death. When he asks for Sarah's hand, Raguel gives her to him with the significant words, quote, "May the Lord of heaven help you tonight, my child, and grant you his mercy and peace." Tobit chapter 7, verse 12. Thus, from the very first moment, Tobias's love had to face the test of life or death. The words about love, strong as death, spoken by the spouses of the Song of Songs in the transport of their hearts, here take on the character of a real test. If love proves to be strong as death, this happens above all in the sense that Tobias and Sarah with him go without hesitating toward this test. They are later verified because in this test of life or death, life has the victory. That is, during the test of the wedding night, love is revealed as stronger than death. This happens on account of the prayer we quoted at the beginning of the chapter, which sprang from the admonitions of the young bride's father, but above all from the instructions given by the archangel Raphael, who had accompanied Tobias on his whole journey under the name of Azariah. This fact doubtless constitutes the uniqueness of Tobit, which allows one to classify this biblical book in a distinct category. Azariah Raphael gives young Tobias various pieces of advice about how to free himself from the action of the evil spirit of that Asmodeus, who had caused the death of the 7 men to whom Sarah had been married before. Finally, the angel himself takes the initiative in this matter. See Tobit chapter 6, verse 17, and chapter 8, verse 3. Above all, however, he recommends prayer to Tobias and Sarah. Quote, "Then, before you unite yourself with her, first stand up, both of you, and pray. Implore the Lord of heaven that his grace and salvation may come over you. Do not be afraid. She was destined for you from eternity, and you are the one to save her. She will follow you, and I pledge my word, she will give you children who will be like brothers to you. Do not worry." Tobit chapter 6, verse 18. The content of Raphael's words is different from that of Raguel's, Sarah's father. Raguel's words express affliction, but Raphael's words, the promise. With this promise, it was easier for both to face the test of life or death awaiting them on the wedding night. When the parents had gone out and had closed the door of the wedding chamber, Tobias got up from the bed and called Sarah to pray together, according to the advice of Raphael Azariah. "Sister," he said, "get up. Let us pray and ask the Lord to give us his mercy." Tobit chapter 8, verse 4. This was the origin of the prayer we quoted at the beginning. One can say that in this prayer, which we will analyze presently, the dimension of the liturgy proper to the sacrament is outlined against the horizon of the language of the body. Everything, in fact, happens during the couple's wedding night. General audience number 115 of June 27th, 1984. Most of this was not delivered. Love as a test. We said earlier that the sacramental sign of marriage is constituted on the basis of the language of the body, which the man and the woman express in the truth proper to it. It is under this aspect that we are analyzing Tobit right now. When one compares Tobit with the Song of Songs or the prophets, it is right to raise the question as to whether or not the text we are examining speaks about this language. While the song offers us the whole richness of the language of the body, reread with the eyes and hearts of the couple, in the same measure, the book of Tobit falls short from this point of view. because it is extremely spare and sober. The fact that Tobias loves Sarah to the point of no longer being able to draw his heart away from her, Tobit chapter 6, verse 19, finds its expression above all in his readiness to share in her lot and to remain together for better or worse, whatever their lot. It is not eros that characterizes Tobias's love for Sarah, but from the beginning this love is confirmed and validated by eros, by ethos, that is, by the will and the choice of values. On the very threshold of marriage, the criterion of these values becomes the test of life or death that both must face already during their first night. Both. Even if the demon's victim is to be Tobias alone, it is nevertheless easy to imagine what sacrifice of heart also Sarah would have had to undergo. That test of life or death, as Tobit speaks of it, has another meaning as well that helps us understand the love and the marriage of the new spouses. And so, when they unite as husband and wife, they must find themselves in the situation in which the powers of good and evil fight against each other and measure each other. The duet of the spouses in the Song of Songs seems not to perceive this dimension of reality at all. The spouses of the song live and express themselves in an ideal or abstract world in which it is as if the struggle of objective powers between good and evil did not exist. It is perhaps precisely the inner strength and truth of love that cover the struggle in man and around him. On the contrary, the fullness of this truth and strength proper to love seems to be different and seems to tend rather where the experience of Tobit leads us. The truth and strength of love are manifested in the ability of love to place itself between the forces of good and of evil that fight within man and around him, because love is confident in the victory of good and is ready to do everything in order that good may conquer. Consequently, the truth of the love of the spouses in Tobit is not confirmed by the words expressed in the language of loving transport, but by the choices and acts that take on the whole weight of human existence in the union of the two. The sign of marriage as a sacrament is brought into being on the basis of the language of the body reread in the truth of love. In the Song of Songs, this is the truth of love absorbed by looks and by the heart, the truth of experience and of loving affection. In Tobit, the distressing situation of the limit together with the test of life or death brings the loving dialogue of the spouses in some way to silence. What emerges instead is another dimension of love, the language of the body that seems to dialogue with the words of choices and acts springing from this dimension. Is not the touchstone of a life or death, of a test of life or death, also part of the language of the body? Is not the word death, so to speak, the last word of that language which speaks of the accidental character of the human being and the corruption of the body? A word to which Tobias and Sarah must refer at the very beginning of their marriage? What depth does their love acquire in this way? And their loving language of the body reread in the truth of such love. For in fact, in the sacramental sign of conjugal unity, in its masculinity and femininity, the body expresses itself also through the mystery of life and death. It expresses itself through this mystery more eloquently than perhaps ever before. From this vast and I would say metaphysical background, we should pass on to the dimension of the liturgy that belongs to the sign of marriage as a sacrament and plays a defining role for this sign. The dimension of the liturgy takes up into itself the language of the body reread in the truth of human hearts, as we know this language from the Song of Songs. At the same time, however, it seeks to set this language into the context of the integral truth of man, reread in the word of the living God. This is what the prayer of the new spouses in Tobit expresses, which we quoted at the beginning. In Tobit, there is neither a dialogue nor a duet between the spouses. On the wedding night, they decide above all to speak in unison. And this unison is nothing other than prayer. In that unison, which is prayer, man and woman are united not only through the communion of hearts, but also through the union of both in facing the great test the test of life or death. Before we submit the text of Tobias's and Sarah's prayer to a more detailed analysis, we say once again that precisely this prayer becomes the one and only word in virtue of which the new spouses meet the test, which is at the same time a test of good and evil, of a good or bad lot, in the dimension of life as a whole. They realize that the evil that threatens them on the part of the demon can strike as suffering, as death, destruction of the life of one of them. But in order to repel the evil threatening to kill the body, one must prevent the evil spirit from having access to the soul. One must free oneself within oneself from his influence. In this dramatic moment of the history of both, Tobias and Sarah, when on the wedding night it was their due as new spouses to speak reciprocally with the language of the body, they transform this language into a single voice. That unison is prayer. This voice, this act of speaking in unison allows both of them to pass beyond the limit situation, beyond the threat of evil and death, inasmuch as they open themselves totally in the unity of the two to the living God. The prayer of Tobias and Sarah becomes in some way the deepest model of the liturgy, whose word is a word of power. It is a word of power drawn from the sources of the covenant and of grace. It is the power that frees from evil and purifies. In this word of the liturgy, the sacramental sign of marriage is fulfilled, built in the unity of man and woman on the basis of the language of the body, reread in the integral truth of the human being. General audience number 116 of June 27th, 1984. Most of this audience was not delivered because of its intimate nature at the time of its delivering. The prayer of the new spouses. The prayer of Tobias and Sarah, quoted in full in the preceding chapters, see Theology of the Body, Audience 114, paragraph 1, has above all the character of praise and thanksgiving. It is only thereafter that it gradually becomes a prayer of petition. Grant that she and I may find mercy and that we may grow old together. Tobit chapter 8, verse 7. When they praise the God of the covenant, God of our fathers, the new spouses speak in some sense the language of all visible and invisible creatures. Let the heavens and the whole creation bless you for all ages. Tobit chapter 8, verse 5. On this vast, one can say cosmic background, both recall with gratitude the creation of man. Male and female he created them. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. Two traditions are present in the words of the prayer. Both the Levite tradition from Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 to 28, the creation of man, male and female, and the gratuitous gift of the blessing of fruitfulness. From the two of them, the whole human race has sprung. Tobit chapter 8, verse 6. And perhaps in even fuller form, the Yahwist tradition. Thus, the prayer speaks about the distinct creation of woman with the words, let us make him a help similar to himself. Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. Tobias and Sarah highlight this point twice in their prayer. Quote, you said it is not good that the man should be alone. Let us make him a help similar to himself. And before this, quote, you made Adam and you made his wife Eve to be a help and support for him. Tobit chapter 8, verse 6. One can infer that the truth expressed in precisely these words of Genesis occupies the place at the center of Tobias and Sarah's religious consciousness as the very bone marrow of their conjugal creed, and that at the same time this truth is particularly close to them. By means of this truth, they turn to God Yahweh, not only with the words of the Bible, but they go further in expressing fully what fills their hearts. Their desire is to become a new link in the chain that goes back up to man's very beginnings. In that moment, in which, since they just married each other, they should be one flesh as husband and wife, they commit themselves together to rereading the language of the body proper to their state in its divine source. In this way, the language of the body becomes the language of the liturgy. It is anchored in the deepest way possible, namely by being set into the mystery of the beginning. The need for a full purification goes hand in hand with this anchoring. As they approach the divine source of the language of the body, the new spouses sense this need and express it. Tobias says, quote, "Now it is not out of lust that I take this sister of mine, but with a rightness of intention." Tobit chapter 8, verse 7. In this way, he points to the moment of purification to which the language of the body must be subjected when a man and a woman prepare themselves to express the sacramental sign of the covenant in this language. In this sign, marriage must serve to build the reciprocal communion of persons by reproducing the spousal meaning of the body in its inner truth. Tobias's words, "not out of lust," should be reread in the integral text of the Bible and of the tradition. The prayer in Tobit sets the language of the body on the terrain of the essential themes of the theology of the body. It is an objectivized language, filled throughout not so much with the emotive strength of experience as in the case of the Song of Songs, but also in a different way of some prophetic texts, but rather with the depth and weight of the truth of existence itself. The spouses profess this truth together before the God of the covenant, God of our fathers. One can say that under this aspect of the language of the body becomes the language of the liturgy. Tobias and Sarah speak the language of the ministers of the sacrament, who are aware that in the conjugal covenant of man and woman, precisely through the language of the body, the mystery which has its source in God himself is expressed and brought into being. Their conjugal covenant is, in fact, the image and the primordial sacrament of the covenant of God with man, with the human race, of the covenant that draws its origin from eternal love. Tobias and Sarah end their prayer with the following words, quote, "Grant that she and I may find mercy and that we may grow old together." Tobit chapter 8, verse 7. One may suppose, on the basis of the context, that they have before their eyes the prospect of standing fast in communion to the end of their days, a prospect that opens up before them with the test of life or death already during their wedding night. At the same time, they see with the eyes of faith the holiness of this vocation, in which, through the unity of the two, built on the reciprocal truth of the language of the body, they must respond to the call of God himself, contained in the mystery of the beginning. And for this they ask, "Grant that she and I may find mercy." The spouses of the Song of Songs mutually declare their human love with ardent words. The new spouses in Tobit ask God that they may know how to respond to love. Both aspects find their place in what constitutes the sacramental sign of marriage. Both share in the formation of this sign. One can say that through one as well as the other, the language of the body reread both in the subjective dimension of the truth of human hearts and in the objective dimension of the truth of living in communion becomes the language of the liturgy. The prayer of the new spouses in Tobit seems certainly to confirm this in a manner different from the Song of Songs, and also in a manner that is undoubtedly more deeply moving.